Well, I think Parliamentary Review does something very interesting. It provides a platform for people to share and express their views, and I hope we're going to be able to build on that even more so that people can interconnect with each other. But it also gives an opportunity for parliamentarians to know that people are taking interest in what they're doing and how they're doing it.
Hello and welcome to the Parliamentary Review podcast, the podcast that puts leadership under the microscope. I'm Jonathan White, and in each of these episodes we'll discuss the political and economic goings-on in the country with directors, CEOs, CFOs, government ministers, chairmen, presidents, maybe one day even the Dalai Lama. Our aim is to discover who these people are, the people who get up each morning and make Britain work. We learn about the crucial hirings, the drawn-out firings, and of course the innovation and successes that make it all worthwhile in the end. Later on in this episode, you'll have the chance to hear our exclusive interview with Lord Blunkett, the former Home Secretary, former Education Secretary, and of course the co-chairman of the Parliamentary Review. But now we're joined by Richard Jones, the founder and director of Agile ICT. Agile ICT is a highly successful and specialist provider of IT solutions exclusively to the education sector. Based in Hampshire, the firm was established a little over 10 years ago and soon became a positive force of disruption in the market. Today, employing over 20 people, the firm works with an ever-increasing number of schools across the country. Richard, thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Now, to begin with, I think the listeners would love to know what it is yourself and Agile ICT have been up to since you appeared in the review in September.
We're still growing. Each year that we've been in business has been a new record year for us. We had another record year last year, actually before the Parliamentary Review was published for us. So we're obviously leveraging that quite heavily in our own sort of marketing efforts. It's definitely helped us win a number of new schools. We've also picked up our sort of first schools in a new county for us, and that's gone very well. And actually, the Parliamentary Review part definitely was an asset there because of the credibility that it confers. We're also meeting with a sort of a cluster of about 17 prospective new schools in that new county in June. And that's all come off the back of the first schools that we won in their county because they're so pleased with the benefits they've seen from our solutions as opposed to what they've had before.
Excellent. I think I'm right in saying, obviously, based in Hampshire, as I mentioned, but now you're expanding across really the south of England, if that's right.
Yes, we go literally across to just inside the M25. We go as sort of far north, sort of Hampshire way, part way up the M1. We've got schools in Wiltshire over near Bristol. So we're expanding in all directions. Our value proposition, it appears to be pretty unique in what we do and how we do it. Interestingly, that's also how it's seen by our suppliers, which I must admit came as a bit of a surprise to me when a couple of those relayed that to me, because I just thought everyone did things the way we did things. We just thought we did them better. But actually, our whole model is quite different to the norm, and no question it is powering our success.
And I think without a doubt, schools certainly appreciate how you function. I think I'm right in saying again that quite almost uniquely you'll provide schools everything from a single cable to a whole ICT suite. I mean, as such, though, the support service you must provide must be exceptionally important.
It is, absolutely, because in theory, computers shouldn't break, but actually they do, and bizarrely, it's one of the things that separates the computer industry from others, in as much as you buy the product and then the supplier keeps updating it free of charge, which is great. However, that often introduces unintended consequences and can result in new issues being created as a consequence of that. So it's very much like a car. If primarily on how to engineer the solutions in the first place. And one of the bits that we found when we entered the market was schools were actually pretty poorly served by the existing incumbents. It was quite common to see suppliers take advantage of the lack of technical knowledge possessed by the schools, which is not a criticism, because schools they're educators, they're not technicians. And quite often that was exploited, which is something that we've never done. One of the things that we do that's unique, and we do it by choice, is our preference is not to impose contracts on our customers. So it's not like the mobile phone companies and the power companies that have loads of complaints about them. Quite simply, every day we wake up with a mindset that we need to recompete for our customers, and that permeates the whole organisation. The only thing really that can trip us up is if we get complacent or if we get greedy. Actually, we have no intention of doing either. And again, compared with our other suppliers, including some of the in-house local authority ones, we've not actually increased our prices for years. Must be 5 or 6 years. But each year we grow. Each year we make more profit because our focus is on doing the right thing, and doing it properly and doing it efficiently.
Absolutely, and I think not only that contract model incentivizes yourself to stay on your toes, and you absolutely have to in doing what you do, but also must build a great deal of trust with the schools you work with, and I think it's obviously exceptionally important. Am I right in saying that you call it the delight the customer model?
Yes, which is a much higher test than just meeting contractual terms. So that's the thing that we focus on. Another unique feature of our model is none of our account managers, who are effectively our sales team, have any form of target other than delighting the customer. So with that model is, whether it's a child or the chief executive of a global company, you will get the behaviour reward. So if you have targets in place, then people will do whatever they can to achieve those targets, and that's not necessarily in the best interest of the customer. Our mindset is actually we want schools to choose to buy from us. They all have various needs that they need to get from someone. So we just we don't particularly care whether they buy from us today, tomorrow, next week, next year. Ultimately, if we give them the best solution at the best value, then they will choose to buy from us. So there's no reason to try and distort that behaviour. And that high level of customer trust is again a huge factor for us. It's extremely rare for us to lose an existing school. When it happens, it's typically because a new head teacher moved to the school who has a pre-existing relationship. But because we're bigger than our competitors, we have more schools, we tend to win more from that model than we lose as our sort of teachers and head teachers move to other schools. They will typically look at what they got there and go, no, not really the standard I'm used to, and get us in.
Super. I think, as you've mentioned, that trust is so important in a sector where, again, you're dealing with educators, not technicians. And with that in mind, the world of ICT, it's certainly one that changes rapidly. And it must be a challenge sometimes, though, to stay up to date with changes that seem to come so thick and fast these days.
Well, absolutely. And the IT industry are also the master snake oil vendors. They are really, really good at convincing people that the latest shiny thing is the answer to all the problems. And the classic one now is cloud computing. Cloud computing is brilliant when it's used in the right place. But until we have far better internet infrastructure in the country with ultra low latency, it's never going to be the best thing when you want rapid user interactivity, i.e. a child pressing a button on the keyboard or clicking on the mouse and wanting something to happen quickly. The rapid change that goes on in the organisation or in the industry is actually one of its great appeals. It's never dull. There's always something new coming out, always presenting new challenges, which for us means new opportunities. We invest a lot of time in our own sort of in-house R&D on the new products and services that are coming out, so we can make sure that we properly understand them, how they benefit the schools. But equally, we are a sort of critical test for a number of our suppliers, and quite a few of them where we've had long-standing relationships will come to us with their new ideas for products to get our take on it, because we're normally quite good in pressing through the gloss on the surface to say, well, actually, how's that really going to bring any value to a school?
And I think and that's so important, that obviously when you are providing your services directly to the schools themselves, they really must be able to rely on all of you to be able to cut through what's important and what's useful, and perhaps what is, as you describe, as snake oil. But looking forward, you've had another fantastic year. What is the business plan for the next 12 months going forward?
More growth. So we are proactively marketing, particularly to doing a special offer to schools that were also honoured to be included in the Parliamentary review last year. So we're going out to them, and I'm literally making direct contact with them. None of them are physically too far for us to provide all our services to. But as part of that, I'm literally sort of saying, here, keep hold of my details. If you ever have any IT questions, or you're getting conflicting advice from different vendors who you're just not sure, feel free, give them my direct number, just phone me up, and I'll give them advice free of charge to help them get to the right decision. Alongside that, it's, to be honest, more of the same, more growth. We are expanding into new areas. We're retaining the schools we've already got. But we're hiring more people, so we're creating more jobs, developing more solutions in-house. So all positive.
It really is a superb trajectory. And on the point of obviously hiring more people, I think looking at the sector more broadly, I think it was just earlier this month, it was Hampshire University who had said that the provision of computing education in English secondary schools is actually in quite significant decline. This may well, I think, align with a more general worry that a lot of younger people leaving education don't necessarily have the right skill sets for certain sectors, especially technology. Have you found this to be the case in your recruiting?
Yes, definitely. There's should we say, the quality of people coming out of sort of standard education, and even actually those who've been to university. A well-written CV with no spelling errors in it is the exception. And these include people who got degrees. What we tend to do is we look quite laterally. So the ideal applicant for a new entry position for us is someone who is just passionate about technology. So those individuals tend to be sort of slight misfits, as it were. but they live and breathe technology. One of the things that we do is we don't use any recruitment agencies. I do all the recruitment. I look at every single CV that comes in. I reply to every single CV that comes in, even if they've got none of the attributes that we require. We like to mix it up with both recruiting people onto an apprenticeship scheme that we've been running for the last sort of 3 years, along with established, heavy hitters who carry quite an expensive market price, but they have 20, 30 years of very good experience mixed in with our younger school leavers, which is very much core to our strategy of actually growing our own talent going forward. And actually, you almost sort of say that the biggest compliment you can have for that is I now notice that some of our sort of competitors are sort of copying the model that
superb.
We sort of created. So, as I say, that's the sincerest form of flattery.
Yes, quite right too. And I think a lot of people in the sector have really come to the realization that it certainly is in-house apprenticeship schemes that are likely to ensure success in the future for the workforce.
Definitely. You need to be developing, you need to be investing in growing talent. And we put a significant amount of effort into attracting the right people. And we're quite fortunate. A number of our more recent recruits have actually sort of approached us to come and work for us. And then, we can take them from there and develop them to the sort of levels that we expect and our customers expect from us.
And is there really on that front anything you would wish the government could do more to help? I'm sure the list is endless, no doubt, but it is a tricky subject, and it is something that needs to be addressed and probably isn't being done properly. But if you did have a magic wand, as it were, what is it you would suggest, perhaps?
Well, as a starting point, I'm actually more for small government than big government, so I never expect the government to do anything for me in the nicest possible way.
Of course.
I think there are some issues with the apprenticeships. I think the apprenticeship schemes or the apprenticeship model is very good, but I think the schemes themselves, how they're currently set up, isn't very good and isn't very good value for the taxpayer. To the point where I even actually considered not doing them because I thought the amount that was being paid to the apprenticeship providers was ridiculous.
Yes.
It's like £15,000, £20,000 a year type level for something that didn't come even close to justifying that sort of cost. Yeah, I have a sort of probably a biased view because I did pretty much all my professional studies whilst working, and I believe that's the way to do it because the theory reinforces the practice and the other way around.
Quite.
So I would say, from a government point of view, it's more the technology education in the lower sectors in the schools, sort of the infant, junior, middle, primary type level. That's the foundation stone. There should be more focus on that at that level because children at that level just absorb things at a ridiculously fast rate. So the nation as a whole,
far more so than adults,
going forwards, must have people who are skilled in technology. And actually, it's actually quite surprising how few young people coming through are really comfortable with technology. So anything that can sort of help on that front, I think, would be a good thing. I think there needs to be greater focus on, should we say, sort of actually practical, useful skills and all this sort of movement that's occurred for quite a few years now, where almost like everybody to go to university, which is just completely mad. And if it ever got to the point where everyone went to university, it would be exactly the same as GCSEs. So even now, for example, if I get an application from a graduate, if they haven't got into one of the top universities, or they've got a first from, should we say, a more normal university, actually, so what? Because you get like a degree now in colouring in, I think.
Yes.
So it needs to be more useful skills that can actually give proper careers to the individuals coming out. I think there's a lot of actually mis-selling that goes on at secondary school level.
I think that's the absolute key word. It is a mis-selling. I think there are. I think if you're 14, 15 years old and you're explained rationally, if you go on this course, you'll develop a certain set of skills that will probably ensure you a fantastic career ahead. But I simply think it's not being explained to them.
No, exactly. And we've got individuals here who have come through our apprenticeship scheme. And again, I'm not a huge fan of a lot of the IT apprenticeships we own, because a lot of them literally just teach you how to use email and how to use internet, which they know going into it. But it's easy money for the apprenticeship provider. We only use a Microsoft certified scheme, which costs us more to put people on, and we pay our apprentices more because we want to attract the best ones. But some of our best staff now came through our apprenticeship scheme. 2 of them were nominated for Microsoft Apprentice of the Year. And they've come through, they don't have a whole load of student debt. They've got had multiple pay rises since they've been with us as their knowledge increases. And they're absolutely brilliant. And compared with people who will go off, effectively extend your childhood for 3 years, rack up a whole load of student debt, come out the end of it thinking, the world's waiting for them.
Right.
Sorry, we're not. It's up to you to make something happen for yourself. And unfortunately, a lot of them end up in very nondescript jobs that don't really have a career path for them. And
with a large amount of debt hanging over their heads.
Sorry?
With a large amount of debt. With a large amount of debt hanging over their heads.
Absolutely, with a large amount of debt. And even in the past, where for example, a couple of years ago, I explicitly wanted someone with a marketing degree because I didn't want to have to teach them marketing. And I hired a fantastic lady in that role who's with us like sort of 7 years. But even she, who actually wouldn't have got her job without the marketing degree, actually said if she had a time again, she would question whether doing the degree, incurring all the debt and everything else, was the right thing to do. Obviously, there are some career paths where you need a degree.
Of course.
So, absolutely. If you want to follow those career paths, then go do it. If you're not sure what you want to do, far better off doing the apprenticeship route.
Absolutely. And I think it certainly is the future. It's a shame it's perhaps taken this country it was too long to realise it.
Yes.
One of the other challenges working with schools exclusively, Richard, must be obviously, a lot of constrained budgets.
Absolutely.
Some people have advocated, obviously, there needs to be an extra injection of cash. I can't help but feel sometimes, I'd hear your thoughts, perhaps it's more to do with the allocation of the funding in terms of the frontline services and whether it's in back office functions rather than frontline.
Yes, you got me started on that one. I totally agree with you. What we tend to find is there's far too much money wasted in exactly the back office functions. To give you an example, a few years ago, we had many of our schools complaining about the performance and reliability of the internet service that were getting provided by the local authority or the education authority. So we looked at whether we could provide an alternative, and the way we do things is we engineer solutions to be what they should be, with no actual thought about cost. We then look at how much they're going to cost us to deliver to see if it's actually something that we can sell at a profit, because our focus is very much profit, not revenue. Any idiot can sell a £10 note for £5. That's not a real business. That's just an ego trip. So we developed a product that was far better than the local authorities were providing. They were getting, for example, an 8 meg circuit. We were providing a 100 meg circuit. They were getting hacked regularly by brute force attacks, and they get ransomware.
I see.
No one's ever breached an Agile Internet solution. We use the same security products as some of the security services use to protect their own networks. And we can provide that. So far better service, far better security at £40,000 typically less than the local authority can do it. And we're a for-profit company. So how is it not possible that a not-for-profit, sort of public sector body can't do what we do? And it can only be down to efficiency.
Yes.
It's structurally inefficient, and there are lots of services that the public sector should provide. It's like street lighting, waste collection, all those, doctors, hospital, all those sorts of things that are the proper role of the public sector. Providing IT services, not the thing to do. If that money was effectively, if I was in charge, I would literally shut all those down and give the money out to the schools.
If you were Secretary of State today, that would be what you would do, I think.
Yes, that's what I would do, because I've seen so much waste. It really irritates me. Because the schools, we go into the schools and you see how hard they work and how committed they are, how they're trying to juggle things. And then we know you've got these people in the back office, effectively, who are literally just job creation. And they're perpetuating their own existences on big fat salaries, big fat pensions, that people in the private sector could only dream of.
Right. And it must be tremendously frustrating to have to, watch that and see that happen. Obviously you work with headmasters, head teachers on a daily basis, and to see how passionate they are about what they do for their schools, but to be frustrated sometimes by other elements.
And it's certainly not good use of public funds. We pay a ridiculously high amount of tax, and that should be deployed efficiently and those sorts of things are simply not an efficient use of our scarce tax revenues.
Absolutely. Now, since the business was founded, it was 10 years ago, 2008, wasn't it, Richard? It's been a fantastic success. Have you had a guiding principle that's taken you across the decade?
Yes. Literally, from the start, the model was delight the customer. It was do the right thing and do it properly. Never put me in the position of having to go and see a head teacher and have them look at me and say, you've taken advantage of my trust. So we never do anything like that. We never do anything that is not in the best interest of the school. And because I say that there's no incentive for any of the staff to do anything other than what's best for the school. We win consistently. We win lots of new schools. Pretty much all our business comes from recommendation. When we started up, it was right at the major part of the credit crunch. No chance of getting any funding from banks, even if you're. And I spent the first 16 years of my career in a bank. I used to lend money for a living. I have all the professional banking qualifications you can get. So if we couldn't get credit, what would anyone else be able to get? Fortunately, the success I'd achieved early in my life meant that I could fund everything. But we've got a very strong balance sheet. That's helped us. Our financial muscle has helped us expand more rapidly. We can make investments in recruiting new people, developing new products that our competitors can't. Therefore, we can get ahead of them from that. But ultimately, it literally just comes down to competent business management.
And perhaps finally, if you could give advice to those perhaps budding future technicians out there now leaving school, what would it be to them?
I think if people have a passion for technology, they've got a fantastic opportunity ahead of them. I would definitely advocate going the apprenticeship route rather than the university, unless the individual is super bright and can get into one of the top universities and study computer science. If they can do that, then definitely go that route. But that's a very, very small proportion of people. It's something, it's constantly changing. There's always new things coming out because it's very much knowledge-based, particularly with us. We don't have formal grade structures and those sorts of things. So an individual will advance and their pay will increase the more value they contribute to the organisation. And because the best people for the sort of technology roles are people who almost have IT as a hobby. You read up about it. It's so incredibly easy to acquire knowledge these days with the internet and Google and YouTube, those sorts of things. It's just so easy to get knowledge. There's no excuse for people to be passive and wait to get spoon-fed, because quite simply, those individuals who've got a bit of ambition about them, a bit of drive about them, will acquire the knowledge, and then they'll leave us others for dead.
Richard, obviously, we're speaking the day before the European elections, and we won't know the results until Sunday. I think the last poll I saw had the Conservative Party in fourth place, which would be unprecedented. A brand new party appears to be leading, and the Liberal Democrats, who have been, I think, in the fair to say, the doldrums of the last decade, appear to have some sort of mini revival. Is this the result of frustration? Is this the result? I mean, what do you think, Richard?
Yes, I totally agree. I think the members of Parliament, should all effectively resign because I think members of Parliament should represent the views of their constituency. If for example, you have a constituency that voted Remain, then fine, the MP for that constituency should lean that way. That said, we had a referendum, which all of them have said that they would support, probably because they thought it would go the way they wanted. I think there's been a huge loss of credibility for politicians generally. The surge in the new Brexit party, I think, is just the beginning. There's so much frustration, should we say, out in the real world, that I think people can be surprised at actually just how that's going to snowball.
Right.
And unfortunately, it does beg the question whether career politicians are a viable thing. The whole Brexit thing, whichever side of the fence you're on, any competent business person should have had two strategies in place on the day of the referendum.
Yeah.
What do I do if the votes remain? What do I do if the vote is leave? So, all these big organisations that are sort of coming out now bleating about it, to be honest, that just reflects the people in charge are actually just very highly paid administrators, not real business people. And it's the big corporates who are particularly pro it because they don't like disruption. They don't like small companies coming in and potentially doing things better and cheaper and sort of taking away their business.
I suppose that the sort of companies that have to be regulated by the European Union but has really no business with them. And the frustration, I later in the podcast, Lord Blunkett discusses how he reluctantly came round to the idea of having another referendum. I don't call it a second one because the first one was in 1975, so another referendum. And I did put it to him, and it is concerning perhaps that the backlash will be significant, and I don't know how we can necessarily measure that at the moment.
No, I agree with you, and it's the sort of thing that another referendum. I think if there was another referendum, I think the Leave vote would win by a bigger margin. But the bigger question is the whole democracy thing, to be honest, because I think what we've seen since the 2016 vote has been unprecedented. The fact that you've got politicians who are literally going back on what they've said themselves. You've also got those politicians who previously were arguing that if someone changed parties, they should have a by-election. There's a number of those who've gone to that change organisation, which seems to be sort of an oxymoron in itself because they don't seem to want to change anything. A number of those, or all of them, are refusing point blank to have by-elections. What are they afraid of? How can you
Yes. Well, I think we all know it's the election.
stand there
Yes.
and just say, one thing, and I honestly, I'm totally bemused by their behaviour, and if there's not a huge clear out at the next generation, I'll be amazed. And I think actually one of the reasons that you mentioned, for example, Liberal Democrats have sort of particularly at the local elections, is because actually there wasn't a Brexit Party representation there. So people didn't want to vote Conservative. And traditionally, I've always voted Conservative. I believe in people taking responsibility for themselves, creating their own prosperity, all that sort of thing, which is very much, shall we say, core Conservative values. I didn't have a privileged upbringing. I went to a normal school, left school at 16. All that sort of thing. Everything I've got, I've worked for and achieved myself. Had there been, should we say, Brexit Party representation in the local elections, I think you would have seen a massive shift to them. I think the gains the Liberal Democrats have achieved is primarily because people don't want to vote Conservative because of the complete mess that's been made of things so far. I think Labour has lost a lot of votes because of the fact that they don't seem to know what their policy is, or they're trying to please everyone all the time. I think the Conservatives have been extremely lucky that there isn't, should we say, a credible Labour sort of party at the moment because of issues around the leadership.
Yeah.
If there was, a bit like the last Labour government, the Conservatives would be absolutely destroyed, and I'm not sure that they'll actually ever recover.
It's extraordinary.
Themselves.
Yeah, and I think, and perhaps finally, I think really perhaps this is much bigger than Brexit, and is more fundamental about democracy at this point. And
absolutely.
Yeah,
that's definitely where it is now.
And I think an awful lot of politicians in Westminster aren't necessarily aware of that yet. I think they will be very soon.
They're going to learn.
But yes. But I think also maybe it does come down to leadership. I think in this country we've tended to be quite lucky in moments of urgency to have a leader at the right time. But today, looking around, I think a lot of people feel as if there is no natural leadership.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think it's a case of, again, coming from a business background, the way the whole negotiation has been handled has just been incredibly naive. I've even sort of seen it highlighted a few times in the press and on the papers, where you literally sort of say to someone, I'm telling you now, I'm going to buy your car, no matter what the price is. Now, please give me a good deal. It's just incredibly naive, and why they didn't let proper business people come in and help them do it. I appreciate there's the parallel universe that is sort of the political scene, but we've got some incredibly successful business people in the UK who I know volunteered to help, and they were just dismissed. And you can bet your life, if the starting point had been, right, we're going to leave on WTO terms unless we agree a better deal, it's a completely different mindset.
I think, absolutely. Spot on. And I think, only time will tell, Richard, but hopefully in maybe 12 months, next year, we'll speak again, and we'll see where we are exactly on this, all right?
Yeah, time will tell, as you say.
Absolutely.
Great talking to you.
I hope you enjoyed our chat there with Richard. I think we learned quite a bit there about the technology sector. Certainly a lot to think about for ministers when it comes to ICT procurement for schools. If you haven't heard it before, coming up now is our conversation with the Parliamentary Review's co-chairman, David Blunkett. Lord Blunkett served as Home Secretary and then Education Secretary in Tony Blair's cabinet before receiving a peerage in 2015. Outside of politics, he's the Vice President of the Royal National Institute of Blind People and the National Alzheimer's Society. And when he has the time, he can be found cheering on his team, Sheffield Wednesday. I hope you enjoy listening as much as I enjoyed speaking to David. Here it is now. We're now joined by Lord Blunkett. Thank you very much for joining us.
You're very welcome.
Now, it would probably be remiss of me if I didn't start, given the recent events in Parliament. I didn't ask you, given your 32 years in that place, about your thoughts regarding the unprecedented situation I think the public are looking at the minute.
Well, I think I see it very much like Joe Public. I see it as though I'm looking at something that is made up, that is scripted, that is like almost a sci-fi film where anything can happen and then anything does happen. And I'm very sad about that because I think that it's damaged our parliamentary democracy. I think that it's brought politics into disrepute, and I think it's created anger on all sides, whether people were strongly in favour of remaining or whether they were, as we call them, Brexiteers.
Absolutely. And given that situation, whether it's going to be a general election, many people are beginning to worry about how apathy taking effect.
Well, I'm worried about two things. Apathy in the respect of turnout and whether people vote, and anger and, if you like, the friction developed into a failure to be able to have a democratic dialogue, so that the respect that we have for each other, that the way in which we debate issues is often now broken down, and there's abuse in the street, not just of people because they're considered to be different or foreign, but because people recognize they have a different point of view. Now, that is new. I've been around in formal politics now for, goodness, almost all my adult life, because I was elected to a local authority in my city of Sheffield when I was 22. And I've never seen that. I've seen people get very annoyed, and that's fine, and people should get angry, but I've never experienced them display it in such personal venom before. And we need to calm that, because our democracy depends on people being able to have genuine disagreements and differences and to work them through the political process. Otherwise, we fall, as history teaches us, into the hands of extremists.
Absolutely. And given that you've just said what you just said, a lot of people are talking now about whether the party structure which does exist at the minute it can survive. We've seen both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party showing signs of buckling.
I think the political system the party system will survive. It may have a very rocky time in the near future, but I think it'll right itself. But it will only do that if political parties themselves sort out what's going on internally. I think both major parties have been, to use an old phrase, infiltrated. Came across a prominent minister just outside the cabinet whose current chair of their Conservative Association was the UKIP candidate against him back in 2015. We know about the challenges within the Labour Party and the way in which people who were thrown out of the party have either been able to or are seeking to rejoin. And so we've got this two-ender, if you like, the bread at the two sides of the sandwich coming together, and the middle is being squeezed. Now, there's academic work to say that actually the electorate aren't all that keen on centre parties, particularly at the moment. And I think we need to be wary of believing that the creation of some sort of centrist party in Britain would solve the problem. It would temporarily, but it wouldn't resolve the differences that people have and how we work them through.
A lot of people have been suggesting recently that the only way out of this situation is with a second referendum. And I write in saying that you have quite reluctantly come to that position yourself.
It took me a very long time to come to the conclusion that we would need an affirmative vote. I resisted it because I come from and represented an area deeply disaffected, feeling the effects of deindustrialization and then the austerity measures on the back of the global meltdown, and felt in my bones, which is why I wasn't one of those who thought we were easily going to win the referendum for Remain in 2016, that you need to deal with the underlying problems and causes of that disaffection. And the simple slogan, "They didn't hear you the first time, tell them again," could be very effective, a kind of Trumpian slogan that could be adopted by those who are very, very vehement Brexiteers. However, I think given the state that we're in, I came to the conclusion a few weeks ago, and I wrote in the Daily Telegraph, that I think the only way to deal with this is to get an agreement for this interim period, because that's what it is, a transition from where we are to where we might be, and then put that to the British people. And if the British people don't like that negotiated agreement, either Theresa May's original or something that emerges from the discussions and the debate and the toing and froing between the two major parties, put that to the electorate and give them a chance 3 years on from 2016 to make a new choice as to whether that's what they want to go for, that's the direction they want to take, or whether they'd like to take a step back and remain in the European Union.
And do you think that the people of Sheffield that did vote leave, many of whom voting for the first time in decades or the first time ever, do you think that they would feel maybe slightly frustrated at the call for a second vote?
Yes, I think they would. And I think we just have to be really honest about that. There would be a great deal of frustration, bordering on anger, people saying, we gave you the message, why didn't you just do it? And we have to be straight with them. The reason it's been complex, the reason it's taken this time, the reason that we are in the undoubted mess we're in, is because it wasn't simple. You didn't, as some people thought, sign a bit of paper and walk away. This is a complex, interconnected, economically, socially, in terms of our trade and our relationships, not just within the European Union, but with the European Union's agreements across the world. This is a complex issue. And to pretend otherwise is not to give people what they want. It's to patronize them and say, yes, we don't think you were wrong. We don't think that you got it wrong when you thought it was a simple way out. I think you just have to be straight with them, and they'll be angry. I mean, people are angry with me when I walk around in my own constituency and say, what are you up to? And I say, I'm up to trying to speak the truth. I'm up to trying to say it as it is, as I always have done.
Absolutely. Now, given all of that, one would expect the governing party to perhaps be somewhere between 20 points and to 30 points behind the opinion polls, but they are not. And there has been an awful lot of criticism of the leadership of the opposition regarding that. Would you have any advice for the leadership of your party?
Well, I think belatedly, from the beginning of April, the two parties realised that they were going to sink separately if they didn't actually try and make an effort and at least display some endeavour to work together. I think had there been two different leaders post-2016 referendum, this would have happened a great deal earlier. It hasn't, but it can now. And it is remarkable that in the circumstances that the government have found themselves, not just in not being able to get the kind of deal that some people wanted, not even being able to hold all their party together, but actually being totally riven publicly with cabinet responsibility having broken down, to find themselves only marginally behind, or even on opinion polls through March, marginally in front of the Labour Party is astonishing. And once this period is over, I think Labour will need to take a very long, hard look at why the British people have not turned, as they often do, to what is called Her Majesty's opposition. There are very complex reasons for that, including the fact that the leadership of the party have only realised, I think, very, very recently, that you have to reach out to people whose views you don't agree with, and you have to win them over to something more than the issues and the policies and the ideology you thought of in the first place.
And on that point, you'll be aware, certainly, that the Parliamentary Review itself has been dedicated to showcasing leadership in all its forms across the country. Now, speaking to many of our contributors, they have made clear that they do feel that leadership has been lacking, both from the government and opposition, as you've said. In your many years in politics, is there a time in certainly recent history where there has been perhaps a leadership vacuum like we're seeing today?
I think we find in Britain an interesting paradox. People want strong leaders, but they want leaders that listen and are responsive. And the two don't always go together. I've lived through the period of both Margaret Thatcher and Tony Blair, two leaders who knew what they wanted to do and were prepared to put it on the line. I've lived through Ted Heath and John Major, who were less clear. Ted Heath on Europe, yes, but not on much else. John Major really trying to mop up after the controversial and divisive Thatcher era, where they showed a different style of leadership. Now, they were portrayed as being weak. I don't think that's always the case. I think that you can have leaders who are very clear what they want to do, but to turn on its head the Marxist slogan, speak softly and walk with a big stick, they can actually do the job clearly and decisively. Clem Attlee was such a person, and in many ways so is Harold Macmillan. And those are the kind of leaders where you don't get bombast, you don't get, I know best and I'm going to push this through, but you actually get someone who can genuinely create a coalition of the willing, but has a clear idea about their values. And I hope we'll return to that.
Absolutely. And I think one of the strengths of the review has always been its sense of bipartisanship.
Well, I think Parliamentary Review does something very interesting. It provides a platform for people to share and express their views, and I hope we're going to be able to build on that even more so that people can interconnect with each other. But it also gives an opportunity for parliamentarians to know that people are taking interest in what they're doing and how they're doing it, and therefore to get the message that they've got to reflect outwards. We need both. We need the input into the system. We need voices. We need ideas. We need experiences through Parliamentary Review inwards, but we also need to ensure that the way in which our politics works is reflected outwards, so that people firstly understand how the system works, secondly the complexity and difficulty of it, and thirdly the way in which they need to tell us, I mean, I'm in the upper house now, but to tell us as parliamentarians what they think and where we're going wrong, and for us to listen.
Absolutely. And on that point, you've been in public service for most of your life, Lord Blunkett, ever since Sheffield City Council. I mean, in that time, what are the key lessons you think you've learned in the best way for policymakers and those at the coalface to communicate and work together?
I've learned that actually there is enormous wisdom out there, and if you're prepared to engage and to listen, then your views might actually change. Mine have on a number of issues, particularly social issues, what small L liberal issues over the years, going in the opposite direction, it has to be said, to most people as they age. And you need to ensure that you've reached out to sufficient people to create that coalition that allows you to make progress, and that you won't create everything you want and change everything you want for the better overnight. It will never happen. There's no days where everything's done and we can all wash our hands of it, and that's fine. We build building blocks. We stand, if you like, historically on the shoulders of those who came before us. And if we get that message, we won't be too frustrated when everything doesn't happen immediately, but we'll be determined to make progress, and we'll punish politically, democratically, those who don't.
Absolutely. And perhaps finally, with that concluding point, it's fair to say, as you've already mentioned, a lot of the population are frustrated, no matter how they vote in the referendum or their general political opinions. But perhaps, for those people, is there something you'd point to be optimistic, looking towards the future about?
I think I'm very clear. We're a great nation. We can't just do things on our own. We have to recognise that we live in an incredibly rapidly growing global environment, and the power sources and the power politically has changed over the last 20, 30 years. But we are creative, we are innovative, and we will pull through, and we'll do it because we won't have anyone else to blame anymore if we come out of the European Union, and we'll need to literally pull our socks up and do it ourselves. In the end, my message is clear. Nothing is ever as good as it seems at the time, and nothing is ever as bad. And we've come through difficult times in the past, and we'll come through again.
Lord Blunkett, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan.
A special thanks to our guests Richard Jones and Lord Blunkett for joining us today. As always, it's been a pleasure interviewing and learning from our guests, and I hope you've all enjoyed listening. Until next time, I'm off to St Stephen's Tavern to raise a glass to raising standards. Goodbye.
Thank you very much for listening to our podcast. You can find every episode on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. If you'd like to know more about the Parliamentary Review, please visit our website at www.theparliamentaryreview.co.uk.